and welcome back to another episode of Healthspan Horizons. Today, we have a very special guest from GlycanAge today. Simi, how are you? Thanks for joining us today.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here with you guys, and I'm great. I'm very good, thank you.
Good. I am so excited that you're on here today. I feel like we kind of just like see each other in passing. We met last year in South Africa, but we think we see your team like passing in the wind.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, pretty much everywhere.
Literally though. I'm so excited. So I would love for you, we'll just jump right in today.
Sure.
Love for you to tell us a little bit about your background, and how you got started at GlycanAge, and then kind of go into like what and who GlycanAge is. I feel like a lot of our audience doesn't really know anything about that. So let's hear it.
Absolutely. So yeah, great to meet everyone. So I am Simi, and I am the medical director for GlycanAge. How did I end up in the longevity space? I think everyone's story is a little bit different. Mine is a little bit unique. So I actually started my career as a physician. I trained in London in the UK. And after I finished and I graduated and I was working as a doctor, I kind of was a bit disappointed at the way healthcare is delivered and kind of the model of healthcare, which is very proactive. So, we wait for people to get sick, and then we spend a really long time and a lot of money actually trying to treat them, as opposed to a more proactive approach whereby you actually prevent people becoming ill in the first place. So more preventative model. And so I actually ended up leaving the NHS for a while. And I was working with this aviation company who were doing a bunch of crazy cool stuff. And I was actually ended up in Switzerland, and I was working on hypobaric chambers, doing research. And then this obviously kind of led me into hyperbaric medicine. Got really interested in hyperbaric medicine and wound care. And that's kind of how I started learning more and more about the longevity space. And then I always say that I met Nicolina, who's our CEO, and she kind of stole me as I started kind of learning more about the longevity space. And I really ended up getting into this kind of place where I was trying to educate people more and more about like all the different technology that exists in longevity and how we can better improve our health by taking a more proactive approach. So that was kind of my journey so far.
I feel like we all have something similar like that, where we're like, oh, this just kind of fell in our lap. Like it was meant to be, like just exactly. Kind of worked out that way. So, okay. So GlycanAge.
Yes.
Okay. Break it down for me as if I've never heard it before. What are you guys? What do you guys do?
Great question. So GlycanAge is a biotech company in its essence, but what we do is what we have is a biological age test, and that biological age test focuses on measuring chronic inflammation. So we know that aging is driven by lots of different biological processes in the body. One of those is chronic inflammation, and for me, I think that's one of the most important ones. And I say that because all of the other hallmarkers of aging, all the other processes that drive aging, they all typically drive chronic inflammation as well. But chronic inflammation is really, really hard to measure. So there are lots of different markers that people might be aware of. So things like CRP, but actually they measure acute inflammation. So this is kind of what happens when you hurt yourself and maybe you get a bruise or whatever. That's acute inflammation. But what we're talking about here is chronic inflammation, which is kind of what I call the silent fire that kind of burns and burns. And as you get older, that fire increases, and it increases your risk of chronic disease. And actually, GlycanAge is one of the first tests that can measure that chronic inflammation by looking at your immune system, and it gives you information about, how are you biologically aging? So what is the function of your cells saying about how healthy your immune system is, and actually how does that change your risk of chronic disease?
So you guys have a test. So is it a blood test? Is it a swab? How would people take it?
Yes, great question. So it is a finger prick blood spot test. So you just need one finger prick, and then you do 4 spots of blood on a little card, and then you send it off to our lab, and we produce a report that goes to the customer. And then with that report, we typically will do either a consultation with one of our team who will take you through the results and explain to you how you can further optimize your health as well.
Interesting. Okay, I know you're not Nicolina, but like, can you tell me how she was like, hey, this is something that I want to do? I think that as especially startups, female founded and such, I always love to hear the background of like how this came to be what it is. especially in a field that's so male dominated. I feel like
yes, we need more. That's for sure. So yeah, I can give you the brief of Nicolina's story. So actually, Gordon Louse, who is her father, is kind of like, I would say, the father of glycomics in many ways, and he dedicated much of his life to glycomic research. And Nicolina was actually working in running a business on the more commercial side, and then her father, I guess, convinced her to come on board and support with GlycanAge. And over the last 5 years that GlycanAge has been commercial, she's just gained a wealth of knowledge in the space of glycomics, and that's kind of how Nina ended up in GlycanAge and being the CEO of GlycanAge.
Interesting. I had no idea that her dad was like involved in that before that.
Yeah, he's our CSO and kind of like the father of all the research that we do. So we're actually a spin-off from a lab, and that lab is called Genos. And Genos, they produce hundreds of papers. They have 300 peer-reviewed papers, and so we have a really big focus on the evidence base.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You mentioned the chronic inflammation, because actually they've now added that as one of the, I guess, official hallmarks of aging. It was a new paper that came up from the original producers of the 9, and they've added some more. And that was one of them. Yeah.
And I think there's 14 now. And I think, to be honest with you, there's probably going to be even more as we do more research. I mean, aging is really, really complicated. And actually, I think as we continue to do this research and learn more and more, we have more abilities to kind of actually modulate and alter that process, which is what I think we all kind of want to do.
Yeah, for sure. And so you kind of already touched a bit on how the GlycanAge is kind of different from other biological age testing mechanisms. And I think we had spoke one time where you mentioned that it can actually sort of trace kind of interventional changes, like if you were doing one thing and then sort of you decide to start taking a supplement or doing something different behaviorally, then you can take it at another period of time and kind of track that change. So can you talk more about that and how sensitive it is and how long in between it would take to gain something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the key benefits of GlycanAge is that responsiveness. So it's one of the few tests that is really responsive to interventions. So, I always say when I see clients and I see patients, it is not useful to tell them they're older than they're older biologically, unless you can explain to them why and how to change it. And so one of the key benefits of GlycanAge is that actually if you do the test today and then you implement an intervention which does effectively reduce the chronic inflammation in your body, you should see a response in the test. And you can see that response in as little as 3 months. So one of the big challenges with tests is that typically they take a really long time to respond to interventions, whereas with GlycanAge, you can see that actually in a relatively short period, which is around 3 months. And, we've done a lot of research. So we've looked at things like various diets. We know that there's no one size fits all diet. So actually, I could be on a fasting mimicking diet, for example, and someone else could be on a different diet, and that might work for me, but it might not work for somebody else, and it might actually be bad for them. And so being able to personalize your interventions and what you're doing for your health becomes really important. And the only way you're going to know if something is working for you is if you're tracking it. And GlycanAge is designed to give you a way for you to track the effectiveness of the interventions you're doing. So whether that's supplements that you're taking or biohacking things that you're doing, it's a way for you to understand if it's working for you and if it's actually reducing that biological age.
That's really good, and I think that's one of the places where we kind of synergize too with Rejuve and GlycanAge on the personalized medicine, personalized insights, really being able to figure out what's actually working for you and optimizing. And I guess that kind of leads into how have your customers benefited from using it? Do you have any kind of big success stories, testimonials, things of that nature?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the really hard things about longevity, generally speaking, and preventative medicine as a whole, is that it requires quite a lot of behavior change. And behavior change is really, really hard unless you have something to help you track. And so GlycanAge is a really great way to identify and sort of keep you motivated. But also, it's a really good way for you to see true health insights. So we know that, like I said, it can be hard to know if what you're doing is really working for yourself. But by looking at your biological age, you can have an understanding of actually where is your health at the moment, really and truly, not just based on how you look and things like that, because what we know is that actually aging happens, it's a molecular process, and it starts happening years and years before we start seeing the physical effects of it. And actually, if you can pick that up really early and really quickly, which you can with GlycanAge, then you can obviously intervene. And we actually see that GlycanAge can start changing up to 10 years before disease happens. And so it really is an early disease detection marker. And it's probably just worth me saying that, our report is broken down into 3 core parts. So the first is the biological age. And I always say the biological age is helpful and it's powerful in its own right, but actually it is the most simple version, or the most kind of basic version of the report. The real value comes in the indexes, which are basically areas that give you information about what areas of your health you need to focus on. So, for example, if I was to do my GlycanAge today, I would get information around, is it my diet that I need to focus on? Or is it that I have a genetic risk for autoimmunity? Or is it more my hormone balance? And so being able to pinpoint the areas of someone's health that needs to be focused on is really powerful. And actually that's to me anyway, one of the really core benefits of GlycanAge. And then you asked me about success stories. So yes, we definitely have had, I would say they are success stories, but also kind of a bit sort of sad stories as well. So we've had situations where we have clients who have done their GlycanAge, and their GlycanAge has come back a lot higher than they expected. And for these individuals, they then go on a journey to kind of understand. So we actually did a blog about this. One of our clients, Adele Martin, she speaks about it quite a lot. But she did her GlycanAge and it was a lot higher than she expected. And so I had a consultation with her and was kind of, asking her a few questions. She's actually a lady who'd gone through early menopause. And we started to kind of investigate what might be causing this. And she went to her doctor and kind of did some various tests. And actually, what we found is actually she had a form of myeloma, and obviously that's quite a shocking thing to hear. But myeloma is historically really, really hard to pick up, especially in the very early stages. But because of her test and being higher, she was able to identify that and then start treatment and start doing the right things earlier. And so again, it's all about that early disease detection, so you can do things before it's gotten to a point where it's progressed significantly. And although that is in some ways a kind of sad and heartfelt story, it also does demonstrate how it can be useful in understanding actually really where your health is, because actually she felt quite healthy in herself, and it was only doing that test that helped her realize that there was some risk there as well.
Interesting. I think we talk about this a lot with pretty much everybody that we come on here, that our goal, I think, in the field of longevity is really not to live for forever. It's to extend our health span and make it more acceptable and more fun and healthy at this moment, rather than living to 200. Even though every time we say there are definitely people that want to live until they're
yes, there are
200. There's definitely people that are like that. But for the average person that's just diving in and trying to learn more about themselves, they want to feel young and still feel like they're in their early 30s and everything like that when they're later in life and such. So I feel like I need to go take my biological age test now, because now I'm what would it say about me? Because I love such things and I like the data that comes back from it. I have enough wearables to give me insights, and I'm give me more. Tell me what I need to fix.
Yeah.
And we can add on to it from there. So I love that. So okay, along that line, I'm going to shift a little bit from GlycanAge now.
Okay.
I want to hear your thoughts and feelings on the field of longevity. So obviously this is kind of something that the field constantly changes, has new advancements. Have we gotten to live for forever? No, we haven't. But what's something that's happening right now that's exciting to you, that there's studies that have come out, or promising things, or new technology? What do you think?
So my area of interest is more ultimately around discovery. And I think that at the moment, the way that medicine is kind of practiced is it tends to be very reactive. And I think what is super interesting now is that you have a lot of these centers that are creating these multi-omic databases and using AI to kind of help use that sort of collection of information to first of all make predictions about disease, which is one of the things that GlycanAge can do, but also understand, from a pharmacogenetic point of view, what are the things that you as an individual, you from a precision medicine point of view, need. And I think that's really, really exciting because we live in a world where chronic disease is our biggest it's our biggest predator. Like, it's the thing that takes us most. And actually, if you're able to first of all not just identify someone who might be at high risk of chronic disease really early and give them exactly what they need, not just from a medication point of view, but even from a diet point of view. If I can say to you, hey, you have this risk and therefore this is the diet that specifically works for you because of your genetic and glycan profile, I think that's really, really exciting. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily fully grasp just how powerful having this collection of multi-omic data can be to help identify even better interventions that don't necessarily require you to be on, medication that gives you a bunch of side effects. And I think that's super powerful to me.
I think so too. I would say that for my personal experience, I had a family member close to me pass away from a heart attack at 50. And so that was really my initial jump into this field of being like, I need to figure out how to make sure that this doesn't happen to me as something that was completely unexpected. So it's what tests do I need to take? What do I need to shift in my lifestyle to make sure that that happens? And I agree. I think that we're kind of hopefully seeing this trend going back into being more preventative rather than reactive. And even just things that we talked a little bit about this in a previous episode of even Ozempic right now, that's taking the world by storm, that everyone has a lot of mixed feelings on, but it's obesity is one of the biggest chronic diseases in the world. If that's something that we can take away for future generations, I think it's a great thing. Do we know the side effects yet? No, we don't. But I think that we're all kind of getting to that point where we're this is important and maybe we should do something about it.
A whole shift in mindset. There's a whole shift in mindset that's happening globally, and I think that is where the real excitement is.
Yeah. Jasmine, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the same question. What's exciting you right now in the field of longevity? Since, let's hear it.
Well, yeah, I think it's exciting that longevity itself is kind of coalescing as an actual thing. Some of my colleagues say maybe some years ago that was kind of seen still in crazy land or something like that. It wasn't scientifically respected as a field, and now it is very much a thing, and it's something that more medical professionals and scientists are starting to pay more attention to, and even at higher levels like government, and then AI being integrated as well. So I think that the AI, of course, being in that industry is going to play a big role too, as we can utilize that to create more personalized protocols and recommendations for the individuals, and being able to kind of suss out those things even faster than people just crunching data manually. So yeah, I think that this field is definitely taking off at an incredible pace, and I think we're already kind of living in the time of the generation of people who, if we have a choice to do kind of radical life extension, it will be within reach.
I agree.
I think so too. So along the same lines with that, I know we've kind of briefly touched on this because both Rejuve and GlycanAge kind of dabble in personalized medicine and such. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, or where you hope to see personalized medicine go, I know we kind of, like I said, we touched on how each of these companies kind of dabble in that, but I want to hear, just tell me what your thoughts are.
I think that this new kind of era of personalized medicine is actually there's kind of a little brother or sister to that movement, which is actually to me around education. And you're talking about all the wearables you have, and all these tests that we have access to. I think one thing that it's driving is people to care more about their health, and people to actually educate themselves more about what do I need, and what does my body require. And to me, coming from the point of view as a physician, where my patients are core to everything I do, I think that element of education and people wanting to understand their health is the most powerful part, actually, because ultimately, if people don't care about the information, none of it's like, it doesn't matter, right? But actually this longevity is making people care so much more and want to understand themselves so much more. And I've always had this kind of like theory that I really do believe we currently have a very paternalistic healthcare system where like people kind of rely on their physician, doctor, or whoever it is you're seeing to give you information. Whereas I think what we're seeing is a flipping of that model actually, and more people are becoming more involved in their own health, knowing more and more about what they need. And actually, because these tests are becoming more accessible, and hopefully will be actually become cheaper, and maybe even eventually we'll get to a point where they're available on insurance. Then I think we're going to see some real big changes, and people are really going to start understanding their health and understanding what they need. And in some ways, maybe a bit radical, but I think you might even see people becoming their own practitioners. Like, they know what they need and they can go and advocate for themselves. And this is, for me, I think one of the most important things that as a nation we should be driving people to really understand their health and take action where they can.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. 'Cause I feel as though a lot of people kind of are already now kind of driven to be their own practitioner, but at this time it's not always safe because let's say you do have some kind of brewing huge condition and you don't know about it, and then if you do try to self treat it, you might kind of reverse and make it worse and everything. And I'd just love to see more of that holistic care, coming into play of early intervention and being able to reverse disease processes and empower people to take control over their health, both before anything bad happens and even while it is that they're having the right tools and experts and resources around them, that it doesn't become the death sentence that it once was.
Yeah.
So I guess I can.
Yeah, definitely a bit of a disclaimer that always seek the advice of your medical practitioner when you're doing stuff, but I do think like knowing about your own health is becoming increasingly important, and it's becoming more and more possible, and I think that's a positive thing.
Yeah, for sure. I guess that kind of segues into what do you think are some of the biggest challenges currently facing the longevity industry?
Immediately, accessibility. I think like accessibility is such a big issue. Unfortunately, longevity is still very much for the rich, if you ask me. I think the majority of people who are going and doing their genomic testing or doing whatever tend to be quite relatively well off, and it's because a lot of these things do still cost a lot of money. And it's the same with everything. Like, when we first started having personal computers, they were expensive and only really rich people managed to access them. But what this does drive is it drives innovation in the space, which is what we're seeing. And obviously with that innovation, you get funding, and with that funding, you get increasing accessibility. And I think it's just important that anybody who is in the space, like GlycanAge, like Rejuve AI, like anybody who's in the space should be really championing the concept of accessibility, because this is not something that should just be for the upper echelon of society. It should be something that's available to everyone. And I think that is a core challenge that we as individuals and advocates for longevity should be focusing on.
Yeah, and I see that you've also kind of joined into the Web3 space as well. As many or some of you might know, they're watching. GlycanAge also accepts the RJB token and some other cryptocurrency as well. So that's just breaking down another one of those barriers of accessibility.
Yeah, it is definitely one of those things. I think you realize as soon as you set foot into this field that you're like, oh, this is very different all around the world. I mean, we can speak for, when we were in Africa, like the meaning of longevity is very different in Africa than it is, say, in the Western hemisphere and things like that. So I agree. I think that education and accessibility are probably the two biggest for me, where it's like people don't know what this means. I think that social media and the internet itself is kind of helping to be able to have people see and interpret kind of what living longer, living healthier, and that kind of stuff can look like, especially in places that may not have as much access. But I do think that that's like a huge barrier that all of us, I think, are trying to do, is to try and make things more affordable and just educate the masses in terms of like, what does this look like for you as a person? It's not just for this 70-year-old white dude that wants to go and live till he's 200. It's like, no, these are for moms that are trying to like stay healthy for their kids. They're for dads who work like full time, 60 to 80 hours a week. Like there's so much more that needs to come into that education aspect rather than being like, oh yeah, that's for me when I'm, 100. It doesn't impact me right now, when in reality, you should be doing stuff now so that you can live until you're 100.
And I actually just want to add to that. So, sorry, I know you asked me for one, but I'm going to give you another one, which I think is also really important because I like to talk. And that is the other side of this, which is, if we all want to live really long and we want to live like, plus 100, then I think there is an element of how do we make sure like we can actually enjoy that life. I think there's such focus on on just like increasing the number of years, even if they're healthy years. Like, yeah, you can be healthy, but you might not be happy. I mean, I actually want to live for that long, right? So there's this element of like, let's focus also on the mental health aspect. Let's make sure we're thinking about how do we make sure people are mentally intact to be able to live that long. I mean, life is hard. Like, there's some really crazy things happening in the world right now. And, I think if we're talking about extending life, we also have to be talking about extending happiness as well. So that's just another little side piece for you.
I 100% agree with that. We have a friend who, with Longevity Quest, that researches super centenarians and kind of like their lifestyle, how they get to that and everything like. And so when we've talked with him, his like most resounding thing that he says is that people that are living that long are living a very ordinary life. There's everything is in moderation. They might still be drinking. They might be smoking regularly. They might be, but they're going out, they're doing stuff with their families. They're very just, they're not doing anything that's like exceptionally wild in terms of like care. They're just hanging out. And his thing when we had him on the podcast like a while ago was basically like, kind of like, you need to relax. Like super centenarians are not worried about the state of affairs in the world and things like that, which kind of feels counterintuitive to kind of how we are in this day and age. But he's like, their stress levels are so much lower. And he was like, that I think that's attributes to how long they live as well. And I was like, interesting. I don't know if we know how to do that as millennials and Gen Zs and such, to just be like, it's like not stressful. But I agree. I think the mental health aspect is so important in that, because why would we want to live for forever if you're miserable and such? So I think that's a good point to play in there. All right. I'm going to switch the gears just a little bit back to GlycanAge a little. I want to hear, I know you guys just had a really exciting announcement of some funding and partnerships that you guys got, which is awesome. I'd love to hear a little bit more about like the partnerships that you guys have that are really changing your business and or the longevity field and such, since you had it fairly recently.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, like I said, I'm a little bit biased because I've been very clear that accessibility is really core to my kind of vision for the longevity space. And so the partnerships that I care about the most are the ones that we're actually doing with like private public organizations, so government organizations, where actually they're trying to identify how we can scale this and make this publicly available. So for example, Chi Longevity, which you guys might be aware of, based in Singapore, are trying to basically build a model for this, like how do we what is the framework we need to be able to apply this to the masses? And so those are the kind of partnerships where I really see value, because we're giving them information, and they're figuring out how we make this, how we disseminate this in a way that is useful, that you can actually build protocols. Because unfortunately, I think when it's really fun to do all the exciting stuff, but ultimately, if you want to make something scalable, there has to be some sort of framework and protocol. And it's boring, but it's completely necessary. So the organizations that are working on that side of things are other partnerships that I think are really powerful. And actually, we work very closely with Chi Longevity. So yeah.
Sweet. Oh my gosh. I agree. I think that we talk about like the regulation side and it's like, blah, nobody wants to talk about that. But honestly, like the regulation and the systems that are put in place to be able to support this are what at the end of the day make the world go round. As annoying as it is to have to get and implement all of those things, it's like, okay, well, you need this in order to get funding, in order to have it, in order to produce it to the masses and all that stuff. So you kind of have to You got to go through the red tape a little bit in order to have such things worked for you. So that's exciting for you guys. Congratulations. I know Jasmine talked a little bit about you guys accepting crypto, which, to be honest, in the longevity space is not entirely common. Can you talk a little bit about what made you guys decide to kind of go that route, or just accessibility, or
I think.
what are your thoughts?
Sorry, Melissa, I actually missed what you said. It's kind of, signal's kind of breaking up. Can you just repeat?
Oh, that might be me. We'll see. I just said, Jasmine briefly mentioned that you guys are now accepting crypto, and I would love to hear how that happened. I feel like in longevity field, that's kind of a little less common. So how was just that an accessibility decision, or like, how did you guys get to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like ultimately we're all in the space of tech, right? Like this is all about tech, and it's all about how do we make tech useful to the masses. And so I think like wherever you have an opportunity to make something more available, more accessible, then you should jump for it. Like it really is just that simple. I think any opportunity we get to partner with or collaborate with individuals who have a similar vision to us, who align with our goals, who are improving accessibility, like Rejuve AI is a company that is an organization that's worth working with for us. So I would say that's kind of how that happened. It was just synergies of wanting to advance technology for the power of longevity, but also increase accessibility. And I think when you have two companies that want to do that, you should definitely work together.
Perfect. That's just a little plug, for us to be working together. So, all right. I have like just a couple more questions left. Actually, I guess I'm taking all of them. Jasmine, do you want to ask some of the questions, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I guess the looking into the future question, as a lot of people like to ask. What are GlycanAge's goals? Let's say in the next 5 to 10 years. Are there any projects, or innovations that you're excited about, or kind of like a vision, or kind of a grand goal or scheme that you're working towards?
Yeah. I mean, like looking at the long-term vision, we want to make early detection of disease accessible, easy, and possible. I think that ultimately our goal is about making prevention possible. We want to make sure that people have the ability and the tools necessary to understand what their risks are so they can act before it becomes a problem for them. And so, in the future, we would really look to go into diagnostics where we can actually help people early, diagnose disease early. And it's a really long path to that. It probably maybe a bit 5 to 10 years. Yeah, I think it works. But it's a really long path because like you said, there's a regulation element to it. If we wanted to be a diagnostic, FDA approval, and that takes a long time, and it requires a really big shift in mindset as well, whereby we're not just like, I don't want to know that I have a disease when it's already ruined my life. I want to know before it's ruined my life so I can stop it ruining my life. And that is our goal. That's the future that I see. And I think it's possible. In fact, I know it's possible. I think there are glycans are, they're a really powerful marker, and there's a lot of information there, and there's still a lot of research that needs to happen to really extract some of that value. But I think the more and more, funding, as you mentioned, we just completed a funding round, the more and more funding we have, and the more research we're able to do, the more we're able to actually discover the information that is in our bodies. Because isn't that crazy? Like all these things, they're inside our bodies. Like our bodies are already telling us these things. We just need to figure out how to
translate the code, right?
how to understand it. Exactly. It's literally that. So, that's kind of where I see the future of this.
That's exciting for you guys. I feel like the diagnostic part is honestly probably the hardest part of all of that, honestly, because just jumping in and just biting off the entire piece rather than just like little bite size, just do the whole thing. I honestly, I think that's a great goal. I think that ourselves as a whole, in terms of this whole field, is like, no, we want to be able to do stuff before it happens. That's really the common denominator with all of us, is preventative. Final question.
Yes. Tell me.
What advice, okay, what advice would you give to somebody just beginning their longevity health span increasing journey? What would you say like their first step should be, or how to get more? Like, what would you do? What would you tell them?
That is a really, really good question. So I think if you're starting your longevity journey, the first thing to do is accept that it's going to be confusing. That's the first thing. Just accept it. Just accept that it's going to be a little bit confusing. And I say this because there is so much information out there, and it's still really hard to determine what's like good and what's not so good. So that just accept it's going to be confusing. Embrace the confusion, embrace the chaos that is currently longevity. We are trying to fix that, but at the moment it is, in my opinion, it is still a little bit chaotic. I think that people should do their research. I think if you really want to get into longevity and you want to be strong within longevity, the thing you need to get used to and you need to kind of like learn to enjoy is doing your research, really understanding actually what does the data say. We are in the age of data, and like there's so much data available, and so really understanding how to actually interpret some of these research studies that are going on, to me that's the best way to make sure you're getting the right information and you're doing the right thing. And then of course I would say if you're starting a longevity journey, it's important, of course, like again, you know, we are GlycanAge, so I'm going to say you have to track, because you can do all of these interventions, really expensive interventions, by the way. Sometimes they can be really pricey, and actually you haven't done anything for yourself. So it's going to be really important that you track yourself. So do your research, make sure you have a way that you're tracking the benefit of the stuff that you're doing to yourself, and make sure you're actually measuring that regularly so you know what does work and what doesn't work for you. And finally, I would say keep a diary of these things, write it down, because there is actually like just so much stuff that actually if you find something really works for you, it's quite helpful to have that recorded somewhere so that you can actually, you know, track what's working for you and how that changes, because as you age actually those things might change as well.
I love that. I feel like as I'm not going to say I'm a newbie to longevity, but I've definitely learned a lot in the last like 18 months, more than I had like prior to this. And I feel the same way. It's like, there's so many different, especially even like thought leaders in the space that have conflicting ideas of what works best for them. And some of them are very extreme in terms of not eating anything, going to bed at 8, or not like fasting was more what I meant. But, and then there's other ones that are like, no, moderation is everything. So really doing your research and figuring out what works for your body is going to be the best takeaway for that, for sure.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Simi. I appreciate your insight, and I'm so excited to work more with you guys in GlycanAge. And I feel like I need to take a test now, so I will need to.
We'll have to do like unboxings and.
I know. I'm like, how can we should go do that. Anyways, it was a pleasure. I'm excited to see you guys in person when we're at Longevity Summit Dublin. Should be a real treat. And we'll chat with you next time.
Amazing. Thanks very much, guys.